All right, so we are here today with a dear friend of mine. Her name is Emilie Heathe. And Emilie is definitely what I would say part of the whole sort of next generation, someone who's doing something different. And New York native, am I right? Mm-hmm. So New York native, and she is the owner of Emilie Heathe, which is a lifestyle and makeup brand. Did I get that correct?
Yes, you did.
Awesome. Well, Emilie, why don't you start us off? Who are you, and how do we know each other? You can tell that story as well.
So I was raised in New York City. I was adopted from Korea, but my parents are from Greenwich, Connecticut and Brooklyn. And my father was raised Jewish, so I'm also half Jewish, so
Wow.
kind of like a melting pot.
Okay.
And how Jonathan and I met actually was, God, I don't know, was it like 7 or 8 years ago?
It was a long time ago.
And we found Jonathan to model for us.
That's correct. That's correct.
So that's how we met.
Yeah.
And then since then, you've had many different kind of lives.
That's true. That's true. What was that shoot we did back there? Because there was one we did with I was covered in gold.
Yeah. So, well, actually, I'm wearing that color,
Okay.
Billions, and
Love
we
it.
put gold in your hair,
Yeah, I
and
remember
then
that.
we poured it on you, and you're like, I'll just like walk out like this.
Yeah.
Okay. But no, I specifically liked how your look. Because we're a luxury brand,
Well,
but
thank
you know, we like more inclusive and diverse looks, and you were also down for anything, so that was cool too. Because a lot of people
Down
are
for
very
anything.
picky. Well, in a good way, in a modeling way that's appropriate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Emilie, the reason why you're here today is first of all because you're a dear friend of mine, and I think Emilie has been a huge help to me in terms of just even with real estate. I can call her basically at any time, and she's just open to give advice. So I appreciate that. I really do. But also to sort of discuss what it is to do what you do and how you became who you are. So first, we'll sort of start with the industry you're in. How did you first get the idea of starting a brand like the brand you have today?
So I think I'm a little bit unique in that I knew at a really young age I wanted to have my own company,
Okay.
and specifically a beauty company.
Yeah.
Which I don't think a lot of founders were, 5 or 6 or 7 saying, I want to have a beauty company.
Why do you think you thought that?
Well, I think my dad had his own company at the time, so I already saw someone who was an entrepreneur, not knowing exactly what that was.
Yeah.
And then at the time, I'm an 80s baby, really. So there wasn't social media, there wasn't online, there wasn't Sephora. So I became very quickly loved beauty at a young age. I had an older sister. So for me, I think I just knew that I wanted to do my own thing, and I wanted it to be creative and artistic, and obviously watching my father, follow in his footsteps. So having my own company, and specifically in beauty, was something that I always was drawn to. I actually got into the art of beauty through comic books. So I would draw comic books, and then I started reading comic books. And then that kind of transformed into painting faces and using people as a canvas versus
That's
paper.
a really interesting story. That's cool.
Yeah. That's why we did last year our Batman collection.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
So that's like a dream come true kind of thing that happened, which was surreal. And then I also think that for me at the time, again, growing up, there weren't a lot of brands. There wasn't a lot of access to different brands. So there wasn't a lot that you could buy, and there weren't a lot of options. So for me, even as a young consumer, I was already seeing like a lot of white space where there were products that had great packaging, but not great formulations, or, good formulas, but the packaging was terrible. And then at the time, not really understanding this fully because I was a kid, even though I grew up in New York City, which is a melting pot and a metropolitan, I grew up very white adjacent. I didn't know a lot about Asian culture. I didn't see a lot about Asian culture in mainstream media. I didn't see people who looked like me or represented like me in beauty brands particularly. So, as I got older, it was as a young child and as a teenager, I used beauty to kind of hide the fact that I was Asian and wanted to not look Asian.
Okay. Wow.
And then as I got older and was more accepting of that and have, worked on that on a daily basis, now it's more about like celebrating that and showcasing that and showcasing that inclusivity and diversity. And as a mom of also like a biracial kid, I, want that to be something where she sees herself reflected at her.
I agree, of course.
So that's really important for me.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty awesome. Another thing that and this is something I've noticed about you just as a person, but also your brand, is a good thing. But
I was like, uh-oh.
It's attention to detail and it's quality. And it is, and that's, I think, what really, really stands out about just you as a person, but also in your products. What made you want to sort of, and I guess you sort of a little bit covered that now, but what made you want to focus on the smallest little details instead of maybe cutting some corners on cost and whatever else it be? What made you want to do something that's sort of high quality and thought through and fully, just, how do I say this, fully presenting a product that is just on every level great?
Thank you. That was the nicest brand ambassador. Honestly, for me, there's probably a lot of different facets of that, of reasons why. So as a typical or atypical, I don't know, but as a typical Virgo, I'm a perfectionist at heart. I've been a perfection.
Virgo too.
Oh, wait, you are?
I am. September 11th, unfortunately, but...
Are we just learning that we have the same birthday, Jonathan? I'm 9/11 too.
What?
Yes.
What?
Yes. I'm 9/11 too. What? Wait.
That's crazy.
I feel like we must have. I always ask people.
I think we've covered this before, but maybe
I don't know about the same day though. I don't think I knew that you were the same day.
I was very young
crazy.
when it happened, so I still consider it, kind of my birthday. Because when it happened, I was always like,
how old were you? Well, you were much younger than I.
I don't know. I was probably like 6 or something like that.
I was in high school, so
I was living in Denmark at the time, and I was confused. I remember like eating my birthday cake, and my parents watching the TV. I'm like, what the fuck? Why are they not paying attention to me? But it was, of course, what was going on.
You were 6. Yeah, I was a teenager, and I was like, holy crap, what the hell's going on?
Yeah.
We thought it was a movie. Like we saw the news stuff.
And you were in New York?
I was in New York. I was in high school, uptown. And I was like on my free period during like classes, and people were coming back from like the local bagel shop saying, oh my God, a plane just flew into the World Trade. I was like, what are you talking, and then someone, I don't know who did it, they got in trouble afterward, but they actually screened it in the auditorium on a big screen. And we saw the second plane hit, we saw the first building fall, and then the second building fall. I mean, it was insane.
I can't even imagine being here for that.
Yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of, that must be crazy. I'm a big advocate of downtown. So downtown is sort of what I focus on with Downtown Magazine and everybody else, as you know. It's funny how, and a lot of people will tell me they're like skyscrapers back in those days, because after that happened, no one wanted to live in skyscrapers. It's like, that's done. Skyscraper business is over with, but it's bounced back. And that's something I think New York really also embodies, is bouncing back, doing all those different things. And I think that's what New Yorkers are always sort of about.
Yes, we're very resilient.
Exactly. And another thing that's really rare, I think, is someone who's actually born and bred in New York City and who still stays here. Yeah. Most people I've met that are born and bred in New York City, they leave.
Well, so technically I wasn't born here. I was born in Korea. But for all intents and purposes, pretty much. It is atypical to find a New Yorker, like a real New Yorker. Because a real New Yorker, not to be snobby, but people will say, oh, yeah, I'm from New York. I'm like, oh, where in New York? It's like, oh, Albany. It's like, no. When people say you're from New York, they mean New York City.
Right, exactly.
just to be clear.
Yeah.
Not New Jersey either. Yeah. So for me, I think that I did leave the city for school. So I went to school in Boston.
Okay.
And so I think, I wanted like a campus and a different kind of lifestyle. But coming back to New York, it made a lot of sense for my industry. Again, like I said, I knew at a young age that I wanted to be in the beauty industry. Yeah. So, the
New
best.
York is perfect.
Exactly. Yeah. It's either New York or Paris at the time. And, it still kind of is. So it just made sense to be here. And then for grad school, when I went to grad school to get my MBA at Columbia, that also made sense. If I was going to network and make connections, why not do it in the city where there are those connections actually there readily available to you? But to answer your earlier question just about like in design and intentionality, I think for me, typical Virgo, that's one of the reasons why. And then also my father actually loved design and art and architecture. He had a really keen eye for like fashion. So all of that love actually came from him, a little bit from my mom, but definitely more so from my father.
Okay.
And I think that infused into my kind of like general aesthetic.
Yeah.
And at the time when we were kind of creating the branding and intentionality behind the brand and the formulas and everything, at the time there weren't a lot of what's referred to as clean beauty. It's an unregulated term, but when we talk about clean beauty,
I don't even think I know what that means.
There you go. So clean beauty is unregulated. How we define clean beauty is for a variety of different ways. We define clean beauty as something that is safe, first and foremost.
Yeah.
And then for me, I like to use less ingredients, better grade of ingredients.
Yeah.
And when we say safe, we really mean non-toxic, non-sensitizing. So, the FDA is getting better now. They actually are passing regulations now to improve cosmetic regulation and ingredients, but there aren't a lot. And the US is not one of the strictest for ingredient regulation.
Yeah.
The EU is.
Yeah.
So we actually follow global guidelines, and specifically EU, Japan, Canada, to make sure that our products are globally compliant. And so we're very strict with lists of blacklisted, which means we don't use those ingredients, and then watch list, which is like things that maybe there's shown some studies that have issues or concerns. But at the end of the day, we want to make sure that they're safe and that they're not going to irritate you.
So that's an interesting, sorry to cut you off. Do you think by you having this clean sort of approach, has that helped you? Or do you think that's drawn back on a financial aspect? Because I'm sure it's more expensive and I'm sure it takes more time to do. Do you think in terms of how much it benefits you, do you think it has benefited you enough? I mean, ethically, I know that's what you want to do, but business terms wise, in terms of margins, is there a huge benefit from that? Is that something people are actually looking for compared to the expense that it is to create?
So when we started, it definitely was not in a financial benefit for us. And when we started, there weren't a lot of brands doing it, but we truly believed that, to build a brand that was ethical, that had integrity, and that I could feel good about, it made sense to just go in that direction. Yeah. Luckily, it has become more mainstream, which is great. And now it's even become the standard or the norm. Yeah. Still a lot of the layman, normal person doesn't know that much about it. Right. I think in California, people are a lot more aware. In New York, people are a lot more aware. There's different regions that are more aware for sure. Yeah. And then of course, internationally. But I think that, for me, the cost is definitely higher. It's hard to find good suppliers who are being innovative. You're kind of pushed down the line because of bigger companies. Yeah. So there's a lot of, unfortunate negative trade-offs to that. But I, in good conscience, wouldn't feel good about putting something out there to cut corners like you talked about. And that's important, right? Exactly. Yeah. There's always compromise with anything that you have to do. For anybody, really, certain things that we can't launch because we don't have, the budget, or, certain customizations and packaging that we'd love to do. But again, the cost may not be worth the return right now for us. But in general, we really don't cut corners when it comes to formula. Yeah. A perfect example of that was during the pandemic. We actually had a lipstick that had been in the works prior to the pandemic. Okay. And we reformulated it twice. Just because of those? Because of one ingredient, there was an issue that came up during development process, so we went back to the drawing board. And then another one they couldn't source. And so we had to find a replacement for it. And it's not just apples to apples. It's not the same. We had to find a better replacement. It's if we're going to replace something, let's find something that's going to improve it rather than degrade it. How do you go about, and this might be getting too much into it, but how do you go about finding those specific materials and the sources and everything else that goes into a lipstick? Where do you go about that? There's a lot of different ways to go about it. The easiest, obviously, is to work with your manufacturer. So most manufacturers have what's called R&D, so research and development team. Okay. In my previous job, when I worked at Avon, we actually had our own R&D team and facility. Most brands, smaller brands, don't have that. They're relying on either a formulator who works only on formulation, or they're relying on their manufacturer. And then from there, there's different ingredient suppliers or regulators that the manufacturer has approved. Yeah. So, for example, we work with a lot of large manufacturers who work with big companies because the big companies have much stricter regulations on who you can work with. Yeah. So that's actually in our benefit for that, because we know if it's been L'Oreal or Estee Lauder approved, they know what they're doing. Yes, exactly. Yeah. And they've had to go through a huge vetting process rather than just some small mom and pop place, which would be great from other perspective, but then it's a little bit more unregulated. Yeah. So we really try to go after really stringent regulations and manufacturers. And then you can sometimes suggest ingredients. They can also suggest ingredients based off of what we call like a brief, where we explain what we're looking for.
Okay.
And then also I know just, from being in the industry,
of course.
Different suppliers who have different like specialities or innovations in formulation. And then you can bring that also to a manufacturer. So a lot of stuff. And then you work with chemists. So there's a lot.
That's all interesting, though. It's funny to see how much actually goes into that, right? And I feel like that's every business. Like, people look at it from one side and it's like, oh, you created a lipstick. Cool.
Yeah, people are just like, oh, you slapped a logo on it, put it. I was like, no.
There's a lot more to it than that, right?
Some people do that, but no.
All right. And it's the same with real estate. People are like, you open a door. I'm like, yeah, that is what I do. I do open doors.
Part of it.
Right.
Like, I take measurements.
Right.
Yeah, but...
There's a lot more that goes into it, and I think that's everything, right, at a high level. Another question I have for you, and this comes to because I actually needed your help back in the day. So my Instagram account got hacked a little while back, and I don't know if you guys have seen these, but there's these deep fake things out there now where it can pretend that it's you, like full on make a video and it'll look like me saying stuff. So the guy gained access to my account and basically it was pitching to my friends. I forget what it was.
It's like Bitcoin.
It was like Bitcoin or something. It was like, I can make you $10,000, da da da. But that wasn't me, right? So all of my friends, and unfortunately, like there was like 10 that actually it worked on.
Oh no!
Yeah. So and then they took their accounts and make the deep fake from their accounts, and then
so bad.
So yeah, it was awful. But I reached out to Emilie and sort of got help from her and her whole team over there. But my question is, so in technology and real estate, of course, social media, marketing, technology, all of that stuff, it's constantly adapting, right? And it's constantly sort of changing your business plan. And I know you're very tech savvy when it comes to that. How do you try to stay ahead of the curve when it comes to trends, when it comes to new technology? Because I'm sure, especially in fashion and in beauty and in whatever it else may be, that's a key, right? To be able to showcase your product and to be able to sort of be on top of all those different things. How do you go about doing that?
So I think one of the best pieces of advice that I got, and I honestly can't remember who or where I read about this, but one of the things that they said was successful entrepreneurs read a lot. I definitely wish I read more, but it is part of my job to be on top of what's happening just in the world and also in tech or things that may seem like unrelated industries, but actually are. This was a lot easier actually during the pandemic, and then you saw this boom of like AI and VR and AR and Meta and all this kind of stuff. So, for us, we have to figure out, we do our research, we do our due diligence, we talk to people, which is great. And then we have to kind of figure out, okay, do we have the bandwidth? Do we have the budget? Is this going to give us the lift or return that we need? Is it worthwhile? And then also, is it something that we believe in or are interested in? So we've looked at, accepting Bitcoin or, virtual
Did you decide
money.
on doing that?
It's actually, it's in our platform. So most CPG brands or most retail brands now use Shopify as a shopping platform. And they actually launched, I think, a beta, which we signed up for just to investigate it. We haven't done it yet. I do, like, as you saw, post-pandemic, there was a little bit of a drop-off on, like, Meta and all that kind of stuff, and everyone talking, and a lot of that stuff. But I still, prior to the pandemic, there was huge discussion around AR and VR, and we've dabbled a little bit in this, in, like, doing filters for our lipstick launch where you could try on virtually the lipstick.
That's
so
cool.
We, dabble in kind of what's, I guess, considered basic tech.
Yeah.
But we're still trying to be with it. Or, fashion week and fashion shows, brands were actually doing virtual fashion shows. So basically like Meta or like 3D model, not even using models, using like just CGI.
How did that go?
And that was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And I took part. Yeah. So for New Year's, there was David Guetta, who's a DJ.
Sure, yeah.
And I'm blanking on who it was, but what was it? There's a very famous festival that goes on in Europe. They ended up doing a virtual festival for New Year's. And we signed up and we took part of it. And we were in our living room on a TV listening to all these DJs. You could virtually watch them. They had like virtual audience members.
Yeah.
The DJs were like DJing in a virtual reality. And like that was a great New Year's. And then I went to bed at 12:05. So
There we go.
So yeah, I think that it's important to be on top of that stuff and also to figure out what of those technologies will actually help you in your business. So we were just talking, before this about AI, right? So there's a big thing now about like AI and copywriting and things like that. So you probably utilize a lot of that as well.
So there's a lot of it, and I spoke with Graham, who was a previous guest who came on this podcast, and he made a really good point. It's like, yeah, all these things are cool, and they're amazing for what it is, but is it really something that's going to benefit you right now? Most of them aren't, and he's in design. And it was like they have a really, really integrated tool, and this is something he was talking about that they use for most of the design now, and they have all these new versions of things, but it just doesn't work to the point that it should to really be integrated yet. And I feel like that's a lot of the things with even the AI and the virtual reality stuff, because there's been another thing, and this is also covered in a different podcast, was real estate in the virtual world.
Yes.
People are buying it.
Yes.
For millions.
That was the biggest, was that people were investing a lot into virtual real estate.
So now they're talking about getting a license in the virtual world to sell property.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so that can be a whole thing. Truth be told, I don't really believe in it. Like, I just don't see it.
That's like I think it's like a very small percentage of people with if you're like so wealthy to the point where you can buy stuff in the virtual.
No, I think this was like Snoop Dogg and Justin Bieber.
Okay. But most people want a physical. I was like, I'd like to buy a place first, let alone whatever, in the physical, before I start dabbling in the virtual. Because like I can't live, I don't want to live in the virtual, but maybe some people want to.
But here's the thing, I read an article yesterday, and I think it was a Forbes article, and it was a percentage of kids who wanted, and I don't know what thing it was, but a virtual world that a lot of kids use instead of birthday presents, and it was a surprising percentage. They wanted coins to spend in the virtual world.
No way.
Yeah, so I do think the next generation, I hate to say next generation, I'm getting old, but I think that's probably a bigger thing for them.
I got it growing right inside me right now.
They're
called mini millennials. That's what they're referred to as a nickname. Yeah, it's a little scary.
It's going to be interesting to see, I think. And also what kind of person that creates. Because I grew up in Denmark, so I was playing outside and all that other stuff. I think if I had kids, I'm going to be no computer, no phone.
I mean, you say that now.
I know.
And I was also raised with like marbles and wood blocks and all that fun stuff. And then when you're exhausted and you're trying to have 20 seconds to yourself.
Here's an iPad.
I mean, you'll see when you get there.
Yeah. Not quite there yet.
You have to do your best, I think, to be the best kind of parent. And sometimes you just need a break, and sometimes it's okay.
And that's life.
Without judgment.
Yeah.
Right? But yeah, no, I think it's going to be interesting. But even before this, I mean, for years, like more than 20, 30, 40 years, gaming has been growing.
Yeah, hugely.
Before this. So it just makes sense that tech in general is going to be a bigger and bigger part of our lives as human beings.
Yeah.
So it's just a question of like what actually, like you said, is really going to improve what you do with your life or your work in a real way that's tangible versus like, investing in a universe that doesn't exist for another decade or so.
Yeah, and it's on a computer that can make more land, that can do more.
Yeah.
Like, so I don't believe in that kind of thing. But I do think the tools that are coming, like the AI tools that perfect those, it'll be like if you're not on top of the game like that, it'll be like a person not having an iPhone.
Right.
Because I think most of it is a lot of people are worried about losing their jobs and all this other thing. And I went into the rabbit hole on that whole thing. But it's mainly, I think it's for the people who are already high performing and who already has sort of and this might sound bad, but it's for people who you can use it as a tool to elevate yourself and elevate the brand, like get you to a higher level if it comes to that point where it's a really efficient tool. And then I think, unfortunately, for jobs that are more sort of tasks and things that people don't want to do, mainly lower paying jobs, I do think it's going to eliminate that based on what I saw and what those things can do.
Yeah.
One of them just passed. They did it online, and the person didn't know. This was a Google interview for a software engineer, and they had the AI talk to the person and pass the job interview as a software engineer for $350,000 a year.
Shut up.
They hired the AI. Yeah. Crazy. Yeah. So it did the whole job interview with the voice thing and all that other stuff.
So the interviewer didn't know.
The interviewer didn't know. Yeah.
No
The
way.
interviewer didn't know. And then the coding skills, of course, they're fantastic at it, like beyond. And that was one of the most like high paying jobs you could sort of get. An engineer for that sort of thing, right? A Google engineer, a programmer, all those different things. It can do that times a million better than a regular person.
I mean, but then my guess, okay, and then there really is what in practical, because I've had people who interview well and then you actually work with them and it's not so great. Yeah. So it's like one of those things where I wonder if they give a good interview, but do they actually, is the product, product really good? Yeah.
Yeah, we never know. And I think it's this time, right? I think time will tell. It's going to be interesting. It's for sure going to be interesting. Another question that I had for you. So when you were starting this, and I guess you covered it a little bit, but when you were starting this, what do you think was your main obstacle? Maybe not main obstacle. What are some of the most difficult obstacles you've found so far as an entrepreneur, as a woman? Anything sort of that really stood in your way that you had to break a barrier from? What do you think that was?
Well, just like a general obstacle that I think everyone runs into as an entrepreneur for most part, but even knowing this ahead, even going to business school, even talking to people and being in the industry,
right?
You're always going to be spending a lot more money than you ever thought because
oh my God.
You have to try a lot of stuff. So marketing is all about testing out stuff. And the big companies do it, the small companies do it. So there's a lot of stuff that we've done that, yes, of course, in hindsight didn't work, but at the time we didn't know. And you have to try these things. Yeah. So, I was like, I need like 2 to 3 times what I think it's going to cost me. No, I needed like 10 times what I thought it was going to cost me.
I think I actually gave you a call when I was first starting out.
I was like, it's going to cost you a lot. So yes, so definitely, money I think is obviously a huge challenge for a lot of entrepreneurs. For me in particular, I think being a woman and being an Asian woman, and now this kind of became a lot more obvious to me, like during the pandemic when we saw a lot of, attacks towards the AAPI community and me
Did that affect it a lot?
Yeah, and having to face certain things as an Asian woman, because as an Asian woman, I had never faced this much hate and discrimination directly. I had kind of, not really seen it in this way because, we were considered the model minority and kind of like less affected, say, than other minorities might be in general. But I mean, there's no comparison to what everyone else lives. But I think, things that now I understand were microaggressions. Now I understand were racist. Things where I would walk into a meeting and people would automatically think that I was not the owner of the company because I looked young or because I was the Asian woman versus the white woman who came into the room with me who was about the same age.
She was the
assistant. So there's a lot of like that has been interesting or, kind of sexist remarks. I at the time actually thought that they were just targeted at me because I was a woman.
As a woman.
I then realized during and post-pandemic that it was not just because I was a woman, it was because I was an Asian woman. Yeah. For example, met with kind of like this old school vendor, very nice guy.
Sure.
But when I was like, we're not sure if we can do this yet, we have to make sure we have the money. And he's like, can't your boyfriend or your husband pay for it? And I was like,
what?
If I was a dude, would you ask him if his girlfriend could pay for it? I didn't say that, but I was like so kind of taken aback and was like, he's example. Old school. Like, and listen, my dad was, he was in his like 70s when he passed, but he was older. Like he's definitely said things where I was like, okay, Dad, like I love you, but no, we don't do that now. But he was open to learning. So you kind of brushed it off as like, a generational thing or whatever, or not really worth saying something. But I kind of walked away and I was like in shock.
Yeah.
And I then, I thought, he said that just because I was a girl.
Mean, that's a weird fucking, sorry. That's a weird statement to make.
But now I realize not only was it because I was a woman, it was because I was an Asian woman.
Yeah. How has that been? So since you work a lot, right? How has that been and you have a family, how has that been on the family side? And sort of how are you dabbling work-life balance, to say? And as an entrepreneur, I know that's hard to do. So how have you tackled that?
So as best as I can, I will say being an entrepreneur in general is really challenging for your family, for your loved one, partner, if you have kids or not, it's hard on you, it's hard on your friends. There's a saying, I think, that a lot of people say, that you can only do like 2 or 3 things really well at once.
That's true.
So if you think about like family, friends, like work, whatever it is, you're really only be able to do like 2 or 3 of them really well. Something is going to have to sacrifice. So I think for me, I definitely have been in places where I was not balancing, but also it was affecting my mental health. It was affecting my, life, my personal life. Honestly, in some ways, it's not why I did it, but when I got pregnant with my first child, that actually really forced me to slow down. Remember, not to go too much into it, but like I was tired and nauseous. Like I physically couldn't do all the things I was doing before. So that was kind of like a nice check. And then just for me having a child, I wanted to be there. I wanted to be around. And I was, in some ways kind of lucky that when I was going back to work, then the pandemic hit, and then I ended up being able to spend a lot more time with my kid, which was also challenging. But yeah, having that kind of knowing that there's somebody else there, reliant on you, dependent on you, did kind of help create or push me in the right direction of balance. And I talk about this a lot because I think that a lot of people in general, but also entrepreneurs, suffer from mental health issues because it is a lot of work. It's a grind. You can't turn it off. It's not like a normal job where, everyone's depending on you, looking to you, a lot of pressure. And I had struggled with, I think, anxiety and depression as like throughout my whole life since I was a kid. And I finally decided in the pandemic, when I started having legit panic attacks when I would go outside because of everything that was going on. And I ended up going on an antidepressant. I ended up going on Zoloft for anxiety. And then that actually helped with my, depression and ups and downs. So I think, talking about things openly and being open about it, and then not being so hard on yourself, talking to other entrepreneurs, getting advice from them is always super important.
I think it's good that you bring that up, because for me, it's the same thing, right? And especially in real estate. So it's basically every day, all day. If I'm working with 10 different clients and this is the biggest purchase they ever made, right? This is their biggest investments of their life. If they text me at 11 a.m. or 11 p.m., I have to be up. And I wake up at 3. So I wake up at 3 and usually go to bed at 9. But there are some days where I'm like, damn, I just got to turn off my phone. But it's also, I know that each day I have to approach it perfectly, right? So I have to be performing at my best. So there was a period of time where I wasn't taking antidepressants or anything like that, but I would take different things to sort of, okay, I need to be, if I'm feeling down, I cannot feel down today, but then the next day, and I know this is something I can't continue doing, but then the next day I'm like, okay, I want to do today, but then another situation where I had to perform perfectly. So I did the same thing, right? And the same thing, because there was never a day where I didn't have to perform perfectly. I went away to Denmark with my girlfriend recently. And that's when it really sort of hit me. It's like, okay, I need to probably take a break from these different things. And it's not like any crazy substance or anything. It's just like I figured different vitamins and different energy drinks and all this other stuff. But I was depending on those things. Like when I went from away to Denmark, I didn't really realize it, but I didn't bring those things. But then when I didn't have it, a whole different level, so that's when I really realized I kind of probably have to step back on that a little bit, but it's hard to do when you're growing, right? And especially in the beginning. And I have a team, but it's also the team are there for other jobs, right? So if I'm not there, everything, and if I drop the ball when it comes to real estate, they'll go to someone else, right? So you can't really drop the ball. So I think actually that is a great point to bring up in terms of entrepreneurship, and because you have to be on all the time. What is a recommendation you can give in terms of dealing with anxiety, in terms of sort of not, because taking a break is sometimes not an option. But what do you do? So
what I actually didn't realize was there's like, when I'd have ups and downs, I would be like super like energized and proactive and and I'd be like, yeah, I'm gonna get all this stuff done, and then I'd crash, and I had like these ups and downs. I was like, why can't I manage this somehow? And advice I was given was, even though you can do those 10 things, only book 2 things. So yes, you could do the 10 things, but then inevitably you are gonna crash, or you're gonna need some sort of help, right? That may, not be in the best interest for your health or mental. So instead of doing the 10, try to really aim for the 2, because then you're not pushing yourself beyond your capacity. It's hard because you're so productive when you do the 10, but it's not productive if then you crash. It's not productive if you burn out in the long run.
Yeah.
So I think that, really just saying no as much as you can. Yeah. Getting better at that balance and knowing, okay, if you have ups and downs, that's the definition of craziness, is to continue doing the same thing. Something has to change. So you can't actually do the 10. You can't because there's such a huge consequence. Yeah. Really only do the 2.
Yeah.
And honestly, there's always that's the one thing that's great about New York. There's always so much opportunity. Yeah. It'll come around again. Right. It's okay.
It's okay to miss one.
Exactly. It'll come around again. So just, you have to kind of also just look at the big picture of what you want for yourself.
I think it's a good thing to put it. Yeah. I do. I have someone told me the other day, and it was about it, and I'm trying it. But it's about creating a flow. So it's called flow state, basically. And it's compared to when you're at the gym. So if I'm at the gym and I go really hard and I'm like, okay, today I can push through and I can do a lot of stuff. And I'm in there maxing out everything. Yeah. Instead of doing that, when you get that urge to okay, I can push through. I'm having a great day. I'm just going to push through. When you get that urge, stop. Stop, do it sufficiently. Don't go up here. Mm-hmm. That way you're sort of creating a flow. You can still go the next day. You're not crushed the next day. Mm-hmm. So it's basically what the whole flow thing. Once you're in a flow, you're trying to avoid going all the way up because you will go all the way down. So when you get those urges for okay, I'm in a great flow at work, or it's just going, let me call all that. And that whole thing, right? So sort of saying no to that, and then you will stay here instead of here. I haven't tried it long enough to see if it works.
No, that's kind of the, I guess, philosophy behind why I went on Zoloft, was basically it would level me out so that I wasn't, because it was actually my anxiety that was making me proactive and productive and energetic. Yeah. But then I would crash. Yeah. So the Zoloft kind of not dampens that, but kind of evens it out so that you're not going not getting that anxious to the point where you are pushing yourself to an extreme. Yeah. And same thing. It's life is a marathon. Why run it with a bag of bricks in your backpack? It's going to be really hard no matter what. There's no reason to have that bag of bricks there.
I agree.
So
I agree. And I think, analogy. In America, because I'm from Denmark, of course, so in America, there's a hard work culture. Mm-hmm. It's especially in New York City, right? I go back there and they're like, what? They're confused, right? But it's also they live for the weekends. I really don't. And I don't, that's why I'm still here. My sister moved back and everything else. So it's a whole different mindset over there. It's actually illegal for your boss to text you after 5 p.m.
Well, that actually may be a good thing, though.
It's illegal. Yeah, I think so too, right? But as entrepreneurs, we don't even really look at it that way.
Yeah, it's also, I enjoy what I do. Exactly. So sometimes when I decide to work in an evening, it's because I want to.
You want to.
On a weekend, it's because I want to. And yes, there's some part of me that feels obligated to, but I'm also the type of person where, and again, I have to learn how to relax, but I'm I get bored. Easily. And the ways that I do decompress is that it really takes a lot for me to turn off my mind. So I'll watch Netflix or shows because then I can kind of just... Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's really the only way where I can get distracted enough to turn it off. And my husband doesn't understand. He's you watch so much shows in bed on your phone. That's so weird. I was no, I need it. Otherwise I won't be able to fall asleep or whatever. You just have to kind of find what works for you.
How do you feel about leaving? Because, for example, I went to Denmark. Yeah, it sucked because of the things I didn't have, but it's also... And this is my girlfriend's first time being there, but I was just in a shitty mood the whole time. Because I wanted to go back, 2 days is enough for me.
Really?
Because it goes back to, I love my day-to-day. Okay. And whatever I do and the speed of things, I absolutely love it. So
if you go on vacation, are you a beach person or a mountain person?
I'm not a vacation person.
You're not a vacation person?
No, because
you're worse than I am.
My every day is a vacation.
What do you mean?
Yeah. I'm and that's at least now, right? Okay. That's where I'm at. But I think I'm a mountain person. Okay. Because I can, and it was the same thing when I was little. My sister and everybody else would want to lay at the pool. I'm fuck, this is so boring. Yeah. Sit and get.
Well, what do you like activities hiking or mountain climbing or rafting? And stuff
that? I like things like that.
So there's things that you enjoy, and outside of the gym or work and stuff that you can try to push yourself to do.
Yeah.
But also people use different things. Like I know people who run it's like their meditation. I hate running.
I do too.
So it's not my meditation.
Yeah. I might look like I'm in good shape, but inside, can't run around the block.
Really?
Can't run around the block.
You have to. It's good for your heart health.
I know I need to.
That's funny, actually.
I know you run a lot of different campaigns, and I know you have a fantastic network. What do you think has been the most successful one that you have run so far? What's one thing where you just hit it on the nail, the whole process just went smoothly, the results were perfect? What's one thing that you really think was a milestone in your brand that you did?
Whoa. That's a tough one. I would probably refer back to the Batman. Honestly, that campaign was really the first time that we did a full 360 campaign. And, you know, you're always trying a 360, meaning across all channels and platforms and all that kind of stuff. But we were very, very intentional and very, very consistent. So for that actual launch, we had photography that all looked the same on model for product. Yeah. We actually did a wheat posting, like, you know, like on the streets, like post no bills. Yeah. Everything was the same. So all the imagery was the same. The ads running were the same. Everything looked aesthetically on brand for the Batman launch, but also on brand for us. And we had an event at a comic book store at Forbidden Planet, which is
That's
like,
awesome. Yeah.
You know, during when and it turned out it was actually the day we had our launch event was the day they had the New York premiere. So I was like, damn it, because I wanted them to come. Yeah, but I was also like, they have the New York premiere. So, you know, we were very, very, very select, you know, down to like, I was wearing all like faux leather outfit to like embody like Catwoman. Yeah. So, you know, that really
Were
did.
you pregnant at the time?
No, I wasn't. I wasn't, but they were stretchy pants. So that was great because it was so consistent and from like a digital and ads and all that kind of stuff. That's what you kind of want. Because as a new brand that people don't know that well, even though we're sold at like some of the largest department stores, there's a lot out there and we're relatively small still. So having that consistency so that if people saw us in multiple places, online or in store or physically on the streets of New York, they were reminded again and again of exactly the same brand. Yeah. And that campaign did really well for us. We sold out of that collection. You know, we got over 1 billion impressions for social media.
Not bad.
Yeah, so that was like all in all really, really great. We knew that we were going to get some people who are just like huge comic book fans who just were buying it. But we actually brought in, it was like 50-50 actually, men and women who were buying the collection, which was great. Yeah. We've always been like a unisex brand. And then on top of that, some of those people actually became shoppers of the brand because of the Batman collection. So that was I would say that was pretty successful.
Awesome. That's fantastic. So I guess what is the next sort of thing that you are trying to do with the brand? What do you think is the next step for you guys? Is there anything you're working on right now? I think you mentioned a fundraiser sort of thing. What's next for you guys?
So yeah, we're working on a bunch of different things. I think for us, a lot of people know us for our nail polish. And, you know, we launched nail polish first because we did that all custom because I felt like people are maybe more loyal to certain products in their beauty routines, but nail color was fun, it was artistic, people picked it more for the color than they did for the brand. Okay. So I thought that was a really great entry point for us, but we always wanted to be more of a full color beauty line. Yeah. And my background is actually, I studied to be a makeup artist, I worked at a MAC store, I went to cosmetology school, hair, skin, and nails, not because I wanted to be a beauty artist, I wanted to have my own brand. Wow. And I wanted to be able to do all those things and be able to develop products and have a knowledge base of actually knowing how to not only make them, but how to use them. Yeah. And so, you know, full color, my history is actually I'm a makeup artist first, then a hair artist, then a nail artist. So we, you know, and when we launched, we wanted to launch our lipstick and our nail because those kind of go complementary hand in hand for color. Sure. We had delays, obviously. So we really want to grow our color category. So more lips down the line, cheek down the line, eye down the line, and really kind of lead that from a beauty perspective and from a luxury perspective. And one of the ways we are doing that is by having a fundraise campaign. Okay. So right now we're doing a fundraise, a general fundraise, but also a crowd. Part of that fundraise is going to be done via a crowd safe or crowd fundraising. So kind of like a Kickstarter, but a little bit different because it's actually like SAFE, which means a simple agreement for future equity.
Okay.
And
That's
you have
amazing.
to be pre-vetted to be on the platform. So it's via Republic.
Okay.
It's Emilie Heathe in case you're looking for it. And actually like SpaceX has raised on there.
Yeah.
Other
awesome.
brands like Sugarfina, which I know is like luxury candy, has raised on there. So that's what we're focused on right now so we can really grow the brand. My intention is not beyond that, is really to help then accelerate and incubate other brands.
Yeah.
I will sell my brand if the opportunity comes and it makes sense, but I actually would love to help incubate and accelerate other brands and grow that and become like a modern Estee Lauder, so to speak.
Yeah, and I think you're great at that already. Like helping others, you really are though.
I like doing it.
You really are. So Emilie, we'll end with a question here. What do you have for young entrepreneurs, people who are first starting out? What is one of the main things, sort of advices that you can give them in today's age?
Okay, a lot.
Let's say 3.
Can I give 4? Because
4.
there's 4. Okay.
You got it.
I am taking this from somebody else who said this, who was an entrepreneur, and I'd done an accelerator through my school, and they told me these 4 things that you are responsible for as an entrepreneur, and I'm saying it all the time. And these 4 things are to hire, to inspire, to retain, and to never run out of money. So those are the 4 things you are focused on: hiring, inspiring, retaining your talent, because good people are what make a good company, and never running out of money. And those 4 things are actually really key.
Yeah.
And that, honestly, if you think about those 4 things and how you do that, and kind of going back to that, because it's very easy to get distracted by everything else that's out there.
For sure.
That actually, I've been sticking to that code, especially number 4, and it's been helpful. It's been hard, but it's been helpful.
Yeah, I gotta start sticking to those. Thank you.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, thank you, Emilie, for joining us today. We're gonna put a link of all of Emilie's products here. It's been amazing. Thank you so much for coming, and we appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, guys.